the first glimpse of Dracula is in their castle in Transylvania. Dracula has purchased a property in Scotland, Carbridge House. An agent has been sent with paperwork for Dracula to sign before heading for Scotland. So Jonathan Harker comes to Transylvania and, despite all the warnings along the way, and enters the castle and wants to conclude the business quite quickly, but it becomes clearer that he's been entrapped.
Mina, the first time we see her is after the events of the entire play have happened. She has come to the Aberdeen Asylum and is banging on the door to be let in. She's already turned as a vampire and she's coming to share her story with the asylum patients and explain that she wants to give them her powers as well, almost in respect to Renfield because she couldn't save them. So everything's already happened to Mina, and this is the first time that we're seeing her. And then we go back to the start when she starts to explain everything that's happened when before she turned, before anyone died, before anything majorly awful happens. And she's a school teacher at the orphanage that she grew up in, and she's with Jonathan, and Jonathan wants to propose to her, but she doesn't want that. Yeah, she's kind of on the precipice of all these new things happening to her.
Renfield's first appearance is in a cell in the Aberdeen Asylum and communing with Dracula for the first time. So Dracula somehow enters Renfield's cell, Renfield's psyche, and they're speaking to Dracula, this mystical being that they don't know what it is, but it feels exciting. Mm-hmm. Act 1, when we came into the rehearsal process, was pretty much written, and we did devise around the scenes that were already written and made small changes. But that was developed through the development weeks, similar to how we developed Act 2 in the rehearsal process, where we had scene breakdowns, almost like this is where this will happen. This is Mina's research. This is this scene. This is this, and then we just sort of worked around it. And Morna would take conversations, take improvisations. Everything would be filmed, and she'd go away and make it sound much more beautiful than any of our improvisations could do.
I just want to get as familiar as possible with the character and learn about who they are. And we got this amazing 42-page document before the audition, which had loads of information about different character breakdowns and vampire information resource. There was so much in there, and different scenes, potential scenes. So and then we got through our first draft of the script, and I read each scene and then wrote down my first impressions of Mina and questions that I had about her, why she did some of the things that she does in it, like what I got about her, what I didn't get about her, just to start painting a picture and see where the gaps are. And yeah, just because my job is to know who she is completely. So the sooner I can start on that, the better, really.
I think there's a difference, isn't there, between having a published text and having a one that is still evolving.
Yeah,
I think that made a big difference for us.
It made a massive difference. I think, Renfield was still being developed, in the last week of rehearsals even. So before rehearsal period started, I was working off a couple of monologues, but not really knowing how this character fits into the story as a whole. The main thing that I found incredibly useful was the ability to just talk about it all and sort of sit down with big pieces of paper, draw big pictures and go, okay, Renfield is here. Renfield needs to get here. What happens in the middle? How do we what parts of this person's narrative are the most important? Who is Renfield connected to? Because, for instance, for this character, they're such an outsider. They're just if you look at the book, if you removed Renfield, nothing would change. The plot would take place as it has taken place. And it's about, what are we commenting on? We're commenting on power, we're commenting on desire, freedom. How do I get that? What do I find connection with Mina? How do I connect with Dracula? What is it that they're offering me? Is it being seen that connects me to Mina? And is it the thought of being seen, but it's actually somewhat false? And the offer of freedom, all of these things. are sort of like within reach, and sort of being able to just sit down with big pieces of paper, map it all out, and just, I've never been in a room with so many like brilliant creatives before. You know, we're working with a composer is just sort of there knocking up something absolutely stunning while, you know, Morna's there typing up an improv that somebody's just done, and Sally's, you know, thinking of the next thing, and it's just so exciting to be in that space. And I have always loved working from devising, you know. This is something that needs to happen in the play. Let's put it up on its feet and see what that might look like. And maybe it'll be disaster, maybe it'll be absolutely terrible and not work at all. So then it's like, okay, well, let's try something different with that. Let's do this thing. And then, let's write a bit of that and see if it works on paper as well as in an improv. And I just love that way of working.
The atmosphere was created such that I've never at any point felt I couldn't try something or that anything would be a bad idea, because you know, you're up against time, you know, the days march on and there's an opening night looming, and you just have to keep producing ideas, and eventually some will stick. But you've just got to keep trying, try different ways. It's like working your way through a maze. But it was certainly a rehearsal room where I also felt quite brave. I didn't think I'd have anything to lose by trying things, which is actually quite rare. You know, I can remember the times when I've just frozen in a rehearsal room because I've just been, I don't know, what is it, worried about what other people might think? I'm too old for that now. I don't give it, you know. I just, you know, so yes, you just try everything.
It's like failure brings reward in a way.
It does,
even if it's like, even if you try it and it's so horrendous that you go, well, we're definitely not doing that. So now we can, can forget that happened, and like, okay, let's try something. And it's like
the amount of like really of ideas that I put forward that were immediately like, yeah, that's definitely not going to work. But at least I was like, well, I'm happy that I'm giving you an option that you can bat out, and then we'll get to the gold underneath. So my bad ideas are very important, actually.
We called them making offers.
Making offers, exactly. Not bad ideas. Making offers.
Yeah. Can I make an offer? Can I make an offer?
Exactly. Yeah. There was, in terms of like things that pivoted, one of them for that was quite crucial for my story was Mina. Why she was at the asylum, why she comes to the asylum in the first place, or at the end. Originally we were thinking, is it because she doesn't want all this power and she wants the inmates to kill her, or is it that she wants to come and see if she can control her power somehow, or in telling the story that changes her maybe and changes her mind about who she is, or the inmates help her realise that she's actually got amazing strength and that she can use it for good. And so we were doing a lot of figuring out why she's here. Like the person that she killed, Dr. Seward, was in charge of that, and where people would know to come and look for her. That definitely helped us tie up the relationship with Renfield, because we then obviously decided that it was because she promised Renfield the freedom that she wanted them to both share. That ended up not happening because Dracula. So she comes to the asylum and says, look, I couldn't save Renfield, but I want to help you. I want you to have the freedom. I think that ties that loose end up quite nicely.
It's a very different ending to the novel, which, you know, constantly calls Mina Murray, you know, this new woman, but in fact Mina almost disappears to go and cut the roses and make tea. It doesn't she at the end almost? Yeah.
And we had a task to find a woman or a non-binary person from Victoria era Britain who had been silenced in some way, and we brought a photo of them into rehearsals on the first day, I think. And shared that, that's sort of got us thinking about the world that we were in and how far we could reach out of the box and what our constraints were in the society, and just get the wheels turning, really.
Yeah, and I'm really like not much of a reader. Like me sitting reading a book about history is probably never going to happen. But I really valued like listening to podcasts, reading things, like trying to understand like the world, the time period, like watching things from, you know, the time that the play is set is of such good value to like understanding the world and where my character might be able to like slot into that, or at least understand the sort of politics of the time,
Exactly.
or the types of people that they would interact with.
I went and sat in Slains Castle. But Slains Castle is supposed to have been the inspiration for the Transylvanian castle. And so we were in Aberdeen and very close to Cruden Bay. And I just wanted to hear what I know Lucy and Mina can hear on the cliff tops, because I appear on the cliff top with them. And I just wanted to hear what the soundscape was. And so that's in my head, you know. And when I say to Jonathan Harker that the castle is vast, it really is huge, and there are lots of doors that will be locked if the place still had a roof. It would have been locked, you know, and it's useful because you can get visual images in your head of places, and it helps to root the words.
Because we're sort of looking at power and the dynamics of power and who's in power. When you watch certain versions of Dracula, it's very much like almost caricatures or like stereotypes of people. Like Renfield is just like this absolute symbol of insanity, you know, like all of these things like trying to escape, but you don't actually get to the crux of like what's going on with them. And
why
it's the same with like, you know, then Lucy's just there being all like, oh, I'm just a woman like caught in something awful, as opposed to like finding out like what's driving her to exist. And I think, well, particular from like my character's perspective, it's like, I don't believe that they are mentally ill at all. I think they're just a person who's been put in circumstances that have driven them to behave what is considered abnormally in a society that has these expectations. And I think it's really important that we remind ourselves of the fact that this is still happening. You know, we are very quick to label people in so many different sections of society who we don't understand. And we're like, oh, well, they're odd. And it's sort of, I think it's sort of allowing us to view that, like, even though we've come so far and we're not necessarily locking somebody odd up in a room forever and ever, but we're still, you know, locking them up in another way, potentially.
I think for me, this play, looking at it through today's lens and applying that to something that was written hundreds of years ago, is the most powerful and most prominent part is Mina's rage, and that being given space and time to be witnessed. And in the book, she finds out everything about vampires and Lucy dying, and her best friend dies, and she reads it all, and then she just sort of collapses and is like, oh God. And then like there's not much of a reaction. She's not given, it doesn't feel real. And centering a woman's rage, that's what makes it a more modern retelling for me. Also looking at myself and being like, where in my life do I give myself space to be angry, and we don't really get to do that like publicly. So that's for me the most important thing about why we're telling Dracula today in this way. For
me now, a question I ask myself as an actor a lot is, if you have a situation in a play, what's it like? Try and relate it to something in your life or contemporary times. And I find myself thinking about figures like Donald Trump or Andrew Tate, who must be somehow incredibly attractive and charming to the women that are drawn to them, but at the end of the day are such coercive controllers and so manipulative and so terribly, terribly dangerous but I see a thread running through hundreds of years of that kind of behaviour, and in a way that's why I'm doing this play with a female and non-binary cast, with this playwright and this director and this theatre company, is to try and turn a mirror back and say, look at it, because characters like Dracula are not pretty, and they're not funny, and they're not safe.
Seeing this classic story, which is majority male characters and the female characters being victims, and our version having women, non-binary people telling the whole story, playing all of the male characters as well, it's important that, because it means that we are telling it through our point of view and giving a voice to those parts that didn't have a voice back then either. And I think as well with Mina being a woman who's racialized as black as well, she exists in this world. She exists in 1890 as people that looked like her existed back then too. It's important to me that she's there and we're not pretending that she's not black. Her being a person of colour, as well as being a woman, as well as being young and also having a career and not wanting to get, like, all of these things can coexist, and she's not just somebody who is a victim and marginalised, pushed to the side. Like, she has a voice and she has a purpose and she has drive. And for me, if I was watching that as from the audience, that would make me feel like I can take up more space in the world. And I know that as a kid, watching shows where the shows that I did find that had people that looked like me in it meant the world, because it helped me see who I could be when I grew up and helped me take up more space. Like I say, it's validating, it's really important.
I think for me, like, obviously the term non-binary is, fairly recent phenomena, you could say, whereas like non-binariness in general has existed for thousands of years. To sort of label a production with people that are non-binary is very different, and we've completely shifted the plot, because obviously Renfield is typically a man, and we've made Renfield a non-binary person in the Aberdeen Asylum for Women, who is being completely judged and assessed by doctors who are men and who have decided to sort of, that's abnormal, so therefore you're not going to be a child maker, you're not going to be a wife, you're not going to be a homemaker, you're not going to be any of these things, so therefore you're almost useless to society. And I think it's really exciting to have non-binary voices on stage and non-binary characters, because while there's been non-binary actors working in the industry for years and years, very rarely do you see that represented through the character itself. Very rarely do you see it almost referenced or mentioned. And I think it's really important that those stories start to exist on larger platforms. It's something I would have loved to have seen when I was younger. So yeah, that's really important for me to be part of that. Yeah.
Dracula's key figures, obviously, my first encounter is with Jonathan Harker, who is the means to an end, and the end is Mina Murray. That's what, when I get a scent of, like a wolf, when I get a scent of Mina Murray, I'm hot on the trail, and so I make it my mission to go to Scotland to find Mina Murray. Yeah. So Jonathan and Mina, I think.
Yeah. I would say Lucy is Mina's most important relationship, because she's been her best friend for 10 years. She's her only family. We see that strongest when you first see them together in Cruden Bay and how excited they are to be together in the summer and how free they feel together. And then also when Lucy is ill, Mina's taking care of her and learning all she can about her disease and what it is, and learning about vampirism after she dies. Like, all of this is because of Lucy, and wanting her to rest with dignity, as she says, and not wanting her body to be violated by the men, and wanting her soul to be free. Those are, like, Lucy drives Mina completely, like, from the start. I think there are a lot of key moments for their relationship. Seeing Lucy be killed as a vampire as well, that's, like, I would say is her most key moment. Yeah, the final nail in the coffin for her to completely just erupt and go after Dracula and want to take that power from Dracula. So I would say, yes, her other key relationship is Dracula, and is the person who is subconsciously entering her field, through Mr. Swales and his warnings, through Renfield and what Renfield sees, that's sort of brewing in her, like, this darkness, and that is Dracula. So I'd say that their key moment is, well, their first one is their initial meeting, and the first offer, and then their second one is the sharing of blood,
There's also the subconscious one, isn't there, where having seen your best friend staked, the Dracula speech where Dracula offers Mina a different life, a way out, a freedom, supposedly, you know, where you could cast aside all the restrictions of your life, current life, if you become a vampire. So we don't really see each other. I think the audience is asked to imagine that's what Mina, that's the voice that Mina can hear in her head, although I'm standing right behind her when I'm saying it.
Yeah.
We're not in the same space at that point.
Yes, and then the blood shading, Mina turning into a vampire, like, yeah, huge moment. And then killing Dracula, because as soon as she learns about Dracula, she wants to destroy him. And she gets thrown in so many different directions from that point until she finally finds her moment and goes, this is it, I'm taking you out right now. This is my chance. So yeah, Lucy and Dracula. So.
My key relationships are definitely Mina and Dracula, for sure. I mean, I think it would be very easy to read it as Seward being one of those key relationships, because obviously Dr. Seward is the one that's keeping Renfield locked up. But I feel like they almost more represent like society and the politics and doctors and research and all of this stuff that's happening. For Renfield themselves, they are entirely alone until Dracula enters their world and their sphere and offers them something new and freedom and excitement and things that they desire more than anything. They almost give them a new lease of life. And Mina obviously is this sort of odd relationship to Renfield. Like, I think there's, in a way, like, I don't really know why you're being kind to me, like why you're entering my cell and chatting to me like I'm a normal person, which obviously never happens. And I think because of that, I see our connection much stronger. And I think we both understand that we could both be in one another's situations if life had turned slightly different. And I think we really find connection in one another, which is why I very much like warn you about Dracula and the risks when I start to realise that there's a bit of deception going on there and things. But yeah, entirely you two for Renfield.
Actually, seeing Mina create Jonathan's journey to Transylvania is a key moment that might get overlooked, but I think it's really important because it shows Mina's love, discovery and education and how clever she is, how much she wants to get out of her box that she's in, and she wants to see the world and experience life the way that Jonathan can. That's really at Mina's core, like she wants that freedom to move. Mina learning about vampires as well, and again shows how she just takes her own initiative and does all the research herself and reads Emily Gerard's book, The Land Beyond the Forest, which is a real book which you can read, and she's a Scottish writer. Read that, it's brilliant. Yes, Lucy being killed as a vampire, that unleashes something very dark in Mina. Her grief and her rage at that happening to her because the men locked her in and didn't allow her to be part of what happens to her best friend. And then her decision to turn to a vampire and drinking the blood, allowing Dracula to feed from her, and then her retaining the power at the end as well, which was unexpected.
For Renfield, it's that the second monologue they do after the asylum scene where I've just met you, and it's where I'm at, where Renfield's at this point in their life where they can imagine what freedom is, and they know exactly what they want, and they can understand exactly what's wrong with the world, and they almost recognise it in Mina's character and see, you know, almost like it's not even just me, like everything is ridiculous and run by this, you know, society, run by this doctor. They make the decisions and we don't have power. But at a pivotal moment in their life where they see themselves getting it, like Dracula's visiting them and they're speaking to Dracula and saying, look, I know that you can give this to me and it's going to be stunning. And then by contrast, I think their sort of second to last key scene is the last one with you, where they've almost accepted that it was all a deception and they understand that they've almost been like used and played and want to use that connection that was formed, or like I saw that in you then, and I'm seeing that you're being tricked like I was, and you need to find it another way because you're not locked in. And I think that's a really like heart-wrenching scene to sort of have that understanding that you're screwed. You can't change the way your life is going, and even when you offer me freedom, it's like you're not going to be able to give it to me. Like, this is it. This is life. And then obviously the final moment where Dracula kills me.
Yeah, you finally meet him.
Yeah, it's like Dracula finally appears, and it's to die. And in a way, it's interesting the way we've done that. Like the sort of just standing and almost watching my own fate play out, I find quite interesting. And I think Renfield in a way accepts their fate, because I think they'd imagine that the afterlife could potentially be more freeing than the life that they have.
Especially like hearing a lot of the feedback that we've had so far with the show, I would love audiences to come out feeling excited about having different interpretations of stories, and that's a good thing. And that it doesn't have to mean that we're making it like worse, like just because it's different. I mean, I always hope that people leave theatre feeling like part of their minds opened up a little bit more to whatever it is we've discussed on stage. So
I like the fact that they'll have spent 2.5 hours watching live theatre. You know, when the curtain went up last night and the music started, a couple of women screamed. They got the fright of their lives. And then I met somebody coming out the other night who said, "I'll no sleep tonight." And you just think, wow, we're in 2.5 hours. We've thrilled, and we've made people kind of go, and we've given them a lot of laughs, and we've told a good story. And essentially, that's what it is. It's a fantastic story.